After all of that, how you been?
Been busy, but been good. I did last week with the Tommy Sotomayor stream and the Saturday stream. I think I did over 13 hours of streaming for the week.
Oh, Jesus. I thought it was a really good way of people who weren't that familiar with, say, men going their own way, the concepts and what it's about to sort of hear you guys speak. Because right from the start, and you could gauge Tommy's reaction, he was actually really digging it and kind of learning a few things along the way in terms of a lot of the things you guys had to say. So it was great to sort of, you could tell that you guys were imparting a bit of new stuff to new listeners as well as Tommy and his audience. And you came off pretty well too. It almost sounded like you guys were reading off a script in the first, say, 40 minutes, 45 minutes at least. It really went well.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm sure TFM would appreciate that feedback also.
Yeah. Especially with TFM. It was like a Cliff Notes of TFM's greatest hits, and he was just kind of like spitting them out, poignant moments of notable videos that he's made. It was just kind of one after the other. It was good.
I think the thing that I found entertaining was Tommy was like, I don't normally get so many dislikes on my video. Why are they disliking the video so much? And I'm like, yeah, women don't want the truth to be out of the bag, because if they do, then, people are going to respond to them differently.
And I thought all of you guys, including Feeding the Cat and TFM and yourself, all gave valid answers as to why. The first thing that came to my mind was because Tommy was saying, he curses and he calls women out and he doesn't hold back. But the thing is, with men going their own way, I think because it becomes very evident when women listen to men that we're done, we're not playing the game, and if we are, it's in passing, and the kind of traditional commitment is no longer there. So when women get a sense of that, they get pissed off. When Tommy and other guys talk, tough and bitches need to sort of wake up or however you exaggerate it, there's still a notion of, I still want to find that good woman, but I'm not putting up with shit. Whereas when they hear men going their own way saying, look, we don't care. Say what you want. We don't want to have anything to do with you. We might screw you, but that's it. It's a very different conversation when you're talking to men who've gone their own way. And I think that's why Tommy got that reaction. And I was reading the feed. I think it's very different to guys that are still open to being on a good plantation, as opposed to guys who are talking about going their own way, saying like, I don't have the buttons that you used to be able to push. So that's the reaction I had when Tommy said that, and you guys gave your responses, which was great. But that's the first thing that popped into my mind.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because Tommy he makes no qualms that he tries to that he's still interested in women and still seeks out their companionship, which at some level is fine, but I think that because he does not identify as MGTOW, women still think they have a chance to be able to use him.
As he was talking with you guys, he was simpatico with everything. You guys were all on the same page, and right. he even mentioned, in a lot of ways, he said he was MGTOW and he didn't even know it. And in some ways, I'm not the same as Tommy. I still sort of have female companionship, but I'm kind of acutely aware, and not just of men going their own way, but sort of everything, the boundaries. Everything's fairly clear. Whereas you could tell with Tommy, he knows a lot and he's fairly strong in his stance, but you could tell when he was asking questions, say, of you guys in TFM, he had that frustration of, why is it that women this and this? Whereas when men going their own way, when they respond, TFM and you guys were like, oh, well, it's because of this, this and this. It's a very matter of fact, well, this is the way it is. And we accept it, and either we don't care or whatever. Whereas Tommy has a level of frustration, although he is awake to the issues. So it's kind of, he's opened the door to MGTOW as to what it is and demystified it. And he's found that he's more or less on the same page.
I would agree with that. And I thought it was interesting, though, because I didn't realize how big his organization was. because a lot of YouTubers will have like, maybe themselves, and if they're more established, they might have a producer, but he has like multiple channels, multiple mods, and kind of a whole system in place it's a very well-oiled machine. But it's interesting because there's a lot of guys out there that are definitely red-pilled. They definitely understand hypergamy. They definitely understand what the threats are. But it's like they've been so, gosh, I don't even want to use the word indoctrinated when it comes to red pill guys, but they've been so indoctrinated that they just refuse to look at the reality of the way women are today. And I say the way women are today, I mean, women have always been hypergamous, right? Mm. But we live in a society today, and for maybe the last 40 years, where there's been no accountability for a woman's negative hypergamy.
I think a mental thing that happens is, like you said, there are far, far more, and it's always increasing, guys who are red-pilled, like Tommy. He's like a confident guy. He knows his limitations. But I think what going your own way does, and the knowledge that's shared online between us guys, and sort of this bank of knowledge that's built up, what it does, it doesn't just clarify. There's a big difference between being red-pilled and understanding, women act like this, and can you believe she did this, and look at this unfairness. What MGTOW does, the knowledge behind it, it allows you to accept it. I find that's the big thing. And the more I listen to conversations between, say, Tom and you guys, I listen to the difference in responses of you guys when you're interacting. Men who have gone their own way have, in their responses, there's an acceptance and there's not a frustration. And I think that's what MGTOW kind of knowledge does. It allows you to really internalize and accept it in this matter-of-fact way.
The thing that really surprises me is that, I talk about this in my book. When you lay out the facts for even red pill men and you say, look, unrestrained gynocentrism, unrestrained feminism is the reason why things have gotten to be the way they are, a lot of guys, it's like they suffer some kind of like cognitive dissonance, or they have some sort of like an emotional break, and they're unable to confront that reality. And so like when I talk to Tommy, because here's the thing, like a lot of progressive individuals, and like Tommy, who is conservative, even he falls into this where they talk about the differences between communities. So in Tommy's case, it's a difference between, the black community and what's traditionally considered the white community. Mm-hmm. And then, a lot of progressives will talk about the difference between conservative communities and liberal communities, like with the idea of like neocons and, corporatocracies and things like that. So what's interesting though is when I was talking to Tommy and I said, I think feminism is the reason this is happening. And I started laying out kind of a brief argument about where those things were. You could see, or you could hear when we were talking to him, he understood that, but it was like he was having emotional obstacles in place where it was like he knew it, but he didn't want to believe it, right? Mm. Like something is true. Something is just, this is the truth. It's staring you in the face. It is based on observable reality, but you just you emotionally don't want to accept it.
Well, he said as much in terms of the difference between white guys and black guys, where Anglo white guys will tend to call out even their mother if she's acting like a bitch, whereas they would never think of doing that. And that dissonance is that sort of that hardwired inability to cast female in a negative light, which is a big reason why I think black men especially get shit all over to sort of such a degree compared to, there's variations, there's that sliding scale, but like when he was saying that guys will kill another guy when they call their mum a name. I mean, they've got their running jokes of your mama this and your mama that, because It's such an insulting apex thing to sort of do. You can't get any worse than that. So you can imagine the dissonance of saying, no, it's female nature. It's your mum. It's your sister. It just doesn't. It reboots your hard drive. They can't.
Right.
They can't actually process it. And when it comes to feminism as well, you're talking about people blaming feminism and neocons. And I always try, and in my videos especially, to get guys thinking simply about men and women or themselves and a situation, because it's too easy sometimes to over-intellectualize big constructs. Like, it's the government and neo-Marxism, and let's look at history and let's look at this. And, maybe my last marriage failed because of this historical fact, and couple it with this and the statistics, and part of my bloodline is from this part. It's like, fucking
right.
Stop. What have all these stories got in common? It's men and women. And really it just comes down to male and female nature. It's described in historical situations and scenarios and anecdotes and stuff. It's actually like the effect of these things is constantly described, but that's what everyone tends to talk to. And then they put this other umbrella on top of it, which is, the government or the left or the right or feminism. Feminism is just kind of opened the gates to female nature. That's all it did on a political scale. Like one funny thing in one of my recent videos, I had a female saying, instead of blaming women, why don't you blame the real culprits, the ones who caused all of this and fooled women and fooled society and fooled God? And I'm going, fucking hell. Like, everyone doesn't want to look in the mirror first and then doesn't want to look at their woman, their girlfriend.
Right.
That's all it comes down to.
Well, and that's the thing is like, and you bring up a very valid point. These people will actually do all sorts of Olympic level gymnastics, mental gymnastics, to avoid looking at the real causation. I mean, hypergamy's always existed. So women will always shit test their men. They will always try to seek out the best provision. Yep. Those things, I mean, they've always happened since ancient times. But what feminism and what gynocentrism has done is they've allowed these women to act on their hypergamy with no consequence, no accountability, and no personal responsibility. The kryptonite now for these women is those three things. It's accountability, and it's personal responsibility, and it's acceptance of consequences. And we don't see that. I mean, you ask a woman to have consequences or to accept the consequences of her actions, even if they're natural ones, and all of a sudden, you're discussing sexism. You're sexist, you're misogynist, you're whatever. And it's interesting because I was reading a news article recently where supposedly there was supposed to be some new female march on Washington, D.C. from like Charlottesville, which is where the woman got run over during the protest recently in eastern United States. Well, apparently it started raining and half the marchers went home because of the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yet, we always hear the refrain, "Oh, we can do anything men can do." But the place I'm going with this is that I firmly believe that when we talk about feminism and gynocentrism, I think we should discuss it as an ideology rather than as a gender, because I see feminists conflate feminism with female, and they are different. Which is why you have...
But they don't. And that's the thing.
Right.
The problem sometimes guys get is we talk from our frame of reference. It's hard for guys to accept women as women. The moment you get a foot in, you start to sort of, she seems rational. She's nodding. But they conflate their gender with it, right, because they have... This is an example, like what you mentioned about that march getting cancelled on account of rain is it comes down to the base of women are all talk. That's all they do. They don't act on anything. They talk so much, they protest, they screw their nose up. They do all these things and it's all fucking talk. I swear, sometimes you think that if there was like a volume switch on the side of a woman's head, men's lives would be a lot better. And if you care about, say you're with a woman, you want to believe what they say. How could you care about someone or even want to date them if you didn't have some sort of trust and caring and believing in them on some level? So they say these things and they believe them in that moment, but they don't really believe them because, that march was an example. It rains a bit and they leave. And it's the same when I hear when there's fundraisers for like cancer. Men will do drastic things like shave their whole head, whereas women will wear a pink badge. They
Right.
don't want their lives disrupted. They want comfort. They'll donate or they'll make some sort of fundraising thing around drink 3 lattes today and help the poor. Like just real
Right.
privileged bullshit. No sacrifice, no ethical standards, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, for women, it's all about virtue signaling and how they feel. And I had this conversation the other day when somebody was discussing we were discussing my second marriage, and it was like a relevant discussion. And I said, when my wife and I first got married, I have no doubt in my mind she was committed to the marriage, no doubt in my mind. But once her feelings changed, so did that commitment. And women, and I use that as an example, but when you see this with women everywhere, anytime a woman's feelings will change, so will her ethics. And when her ethics change, she'll act as though they were always that way. So if she does a 180-degree turn and is completely hypocritical in what her ethics were 6 months ago, oh, well, that never happened. Because she just they only can accept the current reality. It's sort of like are you a parent?
No.
Okay, so young children, very young children, there's a game. It's called Peekaboo, and basically, if you hide your face from a baby or a toddler, not necessarily a toddler, but like a young child, like a baby, between baby and toddler, if you hide your face from them, they think you're gone.
Yeah.
Like you've ceased to exist because you put your hand over your face, because they don't have the ability to realize that that's your hand and you're behind the hand. They see your face, they identify you as your face. Once you hide your face, you no longer exist. That's how women are with their feelings. And I'm not trying to infantile them, or infantize them. But the reality is that anything a woman feels right now, she's always felt that way. And when her feelings change, then she'll tell everybody else she's always felt that way. That's the standard operating procedure for women is how they feel at the moment is how you have to deal with them. And, there's a funny video on YouTube. It's called The Wife Hack. And it is absolutely hilarious. This guy's talking about how, there's no-go zones for women who are too crazy. And then there's women you introduce to your family. Then there's women that you can choose to marry and this and that. And he says what you have to do is you have to analyze a woman and create a series of dots on the board to kind of plot out where she's at. But what's interesting is that can change at any moment, no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, look, and it's all survival based, sort of hardwired survival based. Because when you look at it, women actually advantageously survive by lying and changing their mind. Right. To be rigid is like biologically, like I see women as it's not biologically and evolutionarily sensible for them to do so. So, for instance, whereas with a guy it's the opposite. Men have to rely on the word of another man. You sleep, you need your friend to keep watch. When you're hunting, all that hardwired shit. So, like, men take men at their word, and a man feels really shamed and guilty. It's a hard thing to break. You've got sociopaths and outliers, but generally men learn and adopt this principle of ethics and meaning what you say. And if you do change your mind, it's very shameful for a man just to disengage. He can't pretend. It's why the Matrix was resonated with men overwhelmingly, because a major precept in that movie is once you know the truth, you can't unsee it. Whereas women can easily. Yeah, I know that's true, but today I choose, no, it doesn't matter anymore. I feel differently. I can choose to feel differently. Men can't feel differently. We need to rationalize. If we want to get rid of a feeling, we need to rationalize the feeling away. Women just have a different switch inside them. So they just operate so differently. And Stardust's comment about you can either understand women or love them is really true. You can't do both. You can't love them in terms of a trusting affection like you would your fellow man, because there's a level of kind of honesty and ethical basis or moral basis between people that's very unlikely to be broken. Whereas I think with a lot of men who have gone their own way and have been hurt a lot, what stings the most is women can openly promise and push for this stuff. men aren't usually the first ones who want to go to the altar or want to have babies or want to commit. They don't want to wait. They want to have sex straight away. They just want companionship and sex. Women push for all this larger than life, romanticized version of how things should be, like overinflated, really huge, high stakes. And they promise that they're going to sort of be one of the two foundations underneath this high stakes game of life that they want you to go all in with. And then the next day it's like, no, I didn't say that. No, I feel differently. I always reference Sex and the City. I watched that series when it was out just because I was taking notes on every episode. It was like a big learning thing for me in terms of women, just noting down all the bullshit from episode to episode that they believed. And there was an episode where one of the women, she was struggling with whether or not to have an abortion because she just, slept with she had a hookup. And she was older now. She's in her 40s and she's miraculously now pregnant. And the whole episode is about this moral quandary of what should she do? And,
right.
Should she? But this might be the only chance I get in my life. I've been a career woman and now I've accidentally gotten pregnant. This could be the only time I could have my child. And you can understand the weight of that. But then right at the end, and she actually had an abortion. She says, you know what? If it feels right, then you can never be wrong.
Yeah.
It was a line like that. It was just, and I was looking at the TV screen with my eyes open going, you are fucked. Like just the weight of the moral standard there was so different. It's like, you know what? I feel okay now, so it must be right. Right is just how I feel and wrong is how I feel. That said everything to me. Right.
There could be no better example of situational ethics. And it's funny you brought up Sex and the City. So, I've never been a fan of sitcoms. And I've tried to watch sitcoms. My ex-wife loved Friends. I tried to watch it, but it disgusted me so much that I just couldn't watch it. Mm. I saw the hypergamous nature and I watched these guys who just allowed themselves to be cucked by these women. And I just was like, this is not me. Mm. And there was nobody on the show that I liked. There was nobody. There was nobody I could associate with or empathize with because they all made decisions based on their desire to white knight for these women. And the women were horrible people.
Well, what I see with those is not just that they're theatrical and they don't make sense, the series and soap operas that women like, is that it correlates what we were just talking about. Their feelings, like men are used to sort of understanding and having firm ethics and standards in the outside world. And
right.
And in parallel, men learn to think that way internally too. So the two complement each other, the way a man lives. He has internal ethical standards that try and get to some sort of workable truth, as well as how he perceives external standards, trusting the word of another person. I said I'm going to do this, and then I feel bad if I didn't do it. I said I loved her, but then I cheated on her. Whereas a woman's standards inside, because she never has to take responsibility, she doesn't have that predilection to need something to make sense rationally. So just like Friends, she'll watch, Ross and all these other guys, all these funny, wacky guys that she would never want to fuck. But when she's watching it, she'll tell herself, oh, I wish I could find a guy like that. Because she's got no internal standards. She's got no external standards. She's used to the world standardizing itself for her and taking care of responsibility for her. She has no actual compass internally, and it makes sense that externally her decisions as a result are just as fragmented and nonsensical.
I would definitely agree. But the thing that bothers me the most is, again, and this is, I guess, is because I'm a product of my society, is that, and again, maybe as a man, I require rational explanation, so that might be my fault when it comes to women, but it frustrates me when these women, they act as though they don't understand what the accountability is supposed to be. It's like when the accountability happens, they're like, oh, there's like a little video short online on YouTube where this woman takes this hammer and she bangs a hole in the wall with it. And then she looks at the hammer and she looks at the hole as like, oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen. And it's like, what did you expect to happen? You hit a wall with a hammer. Of course, there's going to be some damage, and that I think perfectly encapsulates how women see consequences and accountability today. And that's the thing and the reason I kind of go for a circle with that is because, again, now that I'm kind of more in the public eye, people know who I am as an author. I've got people contacting me on Twitter. I'm talking to people more in Discord and in general about these specific subjects. It's interesting to see they could see the facts in front of their eyes and not put two and two together and realize it is what it is. Like I accidentally red-pilled a guy. There's a meme. Are you familiar with the movie I Am Legend?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So there's a meme about I Am Legend that says, a man and his dog survive for 3 years after the end of the world. And after one day with a woman, he dies. That's the story. And it's just, you see these guys. So I posted that meme just kind of as a snarky little, hey, look at me, I'm irreverent. And apparently this guy saw it and he sent me a private message and he was like, you posted that meme and it all clicked. Yeah.
So, I mean, when you think, I was just thinking of that movie when that woman entered the scene. She cooks eggs that he was saving for a special day. She's completely chaotic and turns his world upside down. She doesn't cover her tracks going to their home, and she leads these zombies, or whatever the hell they were, back to where he lives. So just the rational order of his world is flipped on its head because of her. That movie is an example of, this woman brings in this chaotic world into Will Smith's world, which might be boring, but it's very organized, and he's living, and he has an interesting life. He doesn't have anyone except his dog, but at least it's workable. He's surviving. He's enjoying day to day. It's not fantastic.
Well, and it's a sustainable structure.
It is. And you could see at the start of the movie, he's enjoying the day. He's got imaginary friends. He's talking to his dog. There are dangers out there, but it's workable. She comes in, turns it all upside down. It's all chaos. And he can't even make sense of it. When he was in the living room, he's kind of constantly pausing in conversation, trying to talk to her and rationalize this chaos that's been brought into his world. It's a hard thing to swallow. With the red pill is one thing, knowing it, coming to terms with it is the hard thing, because kind of knowing red pill stuff knowledge-wise, it can be safe for the majority of guys. It's like, yeah, I know bitches are like this, women do this, what do you do? But actually internalizing, going, you know what, in all seriousness, no, women are like this. Then it starts to kind of say in you, well, I can't hide from this. I have to make decisions now internally. When I talk to people, women, or when this conversation comes up, I can't shut my mouth anymore. It's too important. And that's why Matrix was important to most guys, is because you can't unsee what you've seen, but women can. I've spoken to many women that after the Matrix, the majority of what they got out of it was the cool special effects, the action scenes, vague metaphysical kind of spiritual stuff, but more kind of very surface stuff that you'd see on the front of a card, like, take life by the horns, that sort of real surface.
Right, but none of the abstract stuff.
No deep stuff, no kind of light bulb moment. It was only surface feel-good philosophy, but not deep life-changing philosophy, which is what I think a lot of guys got from that. The feminine mind doesn't. And it just doesn't work that way. There's some women who have higher IQs that do a better job because they can think abstractly outside of themselves and outside of their own immediate feelings. The women that tend to go into professions that force them to mold their brains to be able to, at least learn to mimic rationality, have an easier time. You see women who have gone into your profession, that they may not have been as rationally inclined or mathematically in terms of processing information, objectively that is, before they got into the profession, but now it starts to be a knee-jerk reaction just by necessity of day-to-day job,
Right.
And you see it like with Judge Judy and women who are a lot older.
But the interesting thing about the women who are a lot older, and I don't mean to cut you off too much, but the interesting thing about women who are a lot older is that those were the women who were around when second wave feminism first came into fashion. And so a lot of these women, while they may have called themselves feminists, they were not as indoctrinated as some of the rest. So when you see Judge Judy making certain comments and things that are anti-feminist, it's because she was raised at a time and raised in an environment that had not been as completely indoctrinated into feminism as many other women were. Another prominent woman, as an example, would be Erin Pizzey, who started the first men's domestic refuge in the United Kingdom. She was the same thing. In fact, she actually was a feminist, and when she started addressing concerns that called into question the feminist narrative, they threatened to kill her. They killed her dog. There was bomb threats. She ended up having to leave the country because she was afraid for her life because the feminists were going to kill her.
Well, the underlying thing there just says to me, whether it's Erin Pizzey, even Cassie J, is that whether you're a feminist or not, one thing that sort of strikes me with these women and, Judge Judy, is that if they actually take action in their lives, they don't need the crutch of an ideology,
right,
to speak for them and to get angry on behalf of them. Judge Judy can, as time goes on, will get more and more frustrated at whining feminists, even if she may have been one or a bit of one when she started out. Once she starts to gain the self-esteem of what your own action can do and what your own mind and your own ethics can do when you hit the ground running with them, rather than just sitting there with your arms crossed saying, give me welfare, patriarchy, men are evil, yelling, being a troll. Once you actually take action in your life, and I think it's no different to some of the guys that are just sort of angry MGTOWs as well, is that once you actually implement it, even if it's just mentally, when you're actually using your cognitive abilities to process things in your life and you're living it, that's when you start to kind of get annoyed with the histrionics of ideologies and dogmatism. And I think whether it's Judge Judy, Erin Pizzey, she started up a shelter. Cassie J, she started doing this documentary, and over time she actually took a lot of action and found herself through that action. Whereas if you don't find yourself and you take no action to find yourself, both men and women in their own ways, whether it's feminism or guys in other groups online or wherever, they're kind of frustrated because they never get to know what they're made of, even if it's just mentally. You need to actually take some sort of action, even if it's just kind of a mental, matter-of-fact way of saying, okay, I'm letting go of the rest. Like you feel yourself cutting the umbilical cord and standing on your own mind.
Right. And that's the thing. I think that you really hit the nail on the head there when you said that you have to take action. It's the same thing. It's like, you hear about these guys that they're educated and they know about, for example, physical fitness, but then they don't follow that advice themselves. And obviously, there could be a variety of reasons for it, but mainly it's because they haven't taken the action to put the knowledge into practice. And, it's interesting too, because as we have this conversation and as I've started to come out more into, I guess you could say into the public light or into the public sphere, I've had people actually ask me, well, are you a men's rights activist, or why are you speaking out against this? And, it sounds like you're trying to create a MGTOW movement. And my response has been, MRAs have failed. And you can see this time and time again. The laws are getting progressively worse. And it's not just the United States. You see this around the Western world. My goal is not to do anything other than educate men. That's it. It's to provide a different perspective so that hopefully where someone else may not have been able to reach them, that I might be able to reach them, so that they understand that they have more options than they thought they did.
Yep. And the more I hear these people, whenever they come back with, are you a this? Are you part of my kind of frustration with the acronym of MGTOW as well? It's whether it's MRA or anything. It's when people, they want a convenient box definition because it's something that they can relate to. If you actually don't stand on your own two mental feet, all you can relate to is, are you a this? Are you a that? Rather than, no, I'm just human, or I'm just DDJ. And this is
Right.
what I think. Accept me as an individual. But
Right.
unless you've woken up, unless you've passed, you've ingested the red pill and you're actually standing on your own two mental feet, on your own sort of rationality, cognitive abilities, and your mental acumen to sort of really just sort of say, I'm going to think for myself. I don't need any support. And you're actually enthusiastic about feeling free in that regard. That kind of, what was it, the Avengers, they said, there are no strings on me. Where that's saying, where you really feel that, it's a really big weight off your shoulders. And I can understand before you can actually get to that point, it's scary as shit, because you don't know where you're going. Before you get to any of these awakenings, post-red pill, it's scary because no one can give you a direction, or they can give you a direction, roughly, but no one can give you a map. It's like you're going blindfolded and they push you in a direction and say good luck. And it's much easier to kind of say, well, as frustrating as X, Y, and Z is that I know here, at least I can see them. You're asking me to close my eyes and step off this cliff. And you're saying trust in surviving because, you can point to a few guys who have, but then they can't tell me how they did it. And especially if you're a rational person, the more you rely on your intellectual curiosity, it's a very, very hard thing to disengage that part of your brain.
It's interesting that you bring it up like that because, I see a lot of men, or I perceive a lot of men to measure their own value by a woman's standards, by a gynocentric standard. And what I mean by that is that, they go to the gym to get fit, they get in shape. But they're not getting in shape because they want their own life to improve beyond they want the attention of a woman. They'll go out and they'll find the most high-paying job they can find, not because they want to have success for themselves, but so they can attract a woman. They buy the nicest car they can find for the express purpose of attracting a woman. And these men, they don't have any other reason. And these men are held out as like the alpha males. They're held out as like the prime leaders and this and that. But when it comes to women, women are these men's kryptonite. And the reason I find that interesting is because if you go back, I don't know what your frame of reference is outside of what we talk about online. I have a martial arts background, and one of my favorite martial arts authors is Miyamoto Musashi, who's a Japanese swordsman. Mm-hmm. He also never married. He was MGTOW. And he was by himself and he studied his art because it was his art. That was what he did. Like he completely devoted his body, mind, and soul to both being a martial artist and being just an artist. He was also a calligrapher. And there are lots and lots of stories about him. And you see this with great men throughout history, where those men who don't live according to gynocentric standards, they achieve great things, like Nikola Tesla and some of these other, Western personalities as well. So I think it's interesting because, at the end of the day, a lot of guys choose the blue pill. And I don't think, I know Stardust had said made some comment in one of his videos, and I think it was actually an actual whole video, where he said that the red pill's not for everybody, or MGTOW is not for everybody.
We discussed the same thing in our conversation that I put up as well.
And there are guys going, look, I know this isn't real. I know it's fake, but the steak tastes good. The steak, it appears real, and I think that it's interesting because I'm seeing that a lot now. I'm seeing a lot of guys who are grasping to understand MGTOW, but they're so caught up in their own cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, and the language as well. Don't forget that each person needs certain types of language to kind of give him light bulb moments, breaking down those certain walls brick by brick. Some words mean nothing to certain guys, whereas other words and another personality can really be a great mentor. there's that factor too, because what you said in terms of the frame of reference, they see, you give an example of Nikola Tesla, or who was the other person you said?
Miyamoto Musashi.
They'll look at the window dressing of that and go, okay, he wasn't married, therefore I'm going to be like him and then I'll be happy. It's like, no.
There's the followers.
That's the only frame of reference they see. They see and that's the one thing I'm trying to do in my MGTOW epistemology videos is it's not just the ontology of what you see. I'll make money, like you said. I'll make money, then I'll get women. I'll do this, then I'll get this. I'll do martial arts and women will like me. I'll do this, then... No. The point of these guys isn't that because they didn't get married or because they didn't have a child that they achieved X, Y, and Z. It's because of how they thought. They thought independently. And it's one thing I've mentioned to one or two people. When I listen to TFM, when he's actually being serious, I hear a guy who's thinking his own way by the words that come out of his mouth, in the way they do, how his neurons are firing. TFM believes this stuff. That's what guys need to kind of get to, not to copy TFM and, parrot everything he says, and be inspired by that and learn to actually think for yourself and be enthusiastic to want to kind of be free. It's kind of like, I love my cage. I'll listen to TFM in private and then I'll switch it off before my wife gets home, and then I'll play Happy Families. And this dislocation of having two separate lives and never being completely one person is, I think, what's really frustrating guys today. Because like you said, the script is feminine. Until the age of about 11 or 12, or whenever a male reaches puberty, I reckon 90%, if not probably more, of guys are only actually individual and free for those 11 or 12 years before they hit puberty. They do not give two shits what women think. And then, biology happens and hormones, and it's like everything is about what women think. I still remember this anecdotal story. A couple of years ago, I was out with my camera near one of the beaches close by to where I live. And there was this old relic cannon that's, just like a feature near the beach. And there were these like 4 or 5 young boys, probably about 8, and they were just climbing on this, and that was their fort. And there were these 2 little girls, probably their friends, and they were trying to climb onto this cannon that the boys were sitting on. And they were saying to the girls, go away. What do you keep following us? Just the guys did not want them there. It's like, stop ruining my fun. We don't want you. We don't understand you. Fuck off. And I just kind of looked at them and I said, in 3 or 4 years, you are going to be the girls.
Right.
That dynamic is completely going to flip. Women are going to be figuratively on that cannon, and guys are going to be kind of below. Like, what was that Aliens movie where like those thousands of aliens are climbing up that pyramid?
Right.
They'd be like climbing up to get that goddess. And that independence, I just looked at those young boys saying, enjoy this freedom and this complete independence where there's not 1 ounce of you that cares or even wants what these women who you have no interest with think. And it was just really telling. And then from then on, they're going to spend the rest of their lives just trying to please them, following a female script, and not really thinking for themselves. And that's the challenge that I mentioned about sort of learning from people that, speak to you, that you admire, that resonate with you, that give you light bulb moments. Follow them, admire them, read them, learn, but learn how they think, not just what, but how. The epistemology of how one knows something is one of the most important things you come to realize in actually living and going your own way.
Well, and I think the other side of that is I think you're absolutely correct when you say that, people want a framework to follow. So, I believe this because TFM says so. That's the wrong reason to believe it. You should believe it because TFM gave you the idea and you verified it for yourself, and this is something that works for you.
Why does it sound true to you?
Exactly.
Why does it resonate? Now, it's not just because he strung a few perfect words together and they hit you like a spear. Yeah, right. But what was behind it? Start thinking like TFM. Well, not really TFM, but start thinking like a TFM.
Like an independent man.
Yeah, like an independent man as he is. That's what you recognize. when you
Right.
listen to somebody like him. That's what I recognized back when Stardust was making his earlier videos. When you hear the light coming from somebody, like you hear freedom, you hear the honest truth coming from somebody, that is what you need to hold on to. Not just the words, but what they mean, where they come from. And I want to be free too. You know, you don't get to freedom by saying, I'm going to repeat what HuMAN says or what TFM says. Then you're just a facsimile. Then you need TFM. You need the umbilical cord to be continually connected to him. And this is nothing against him. He's a great guy. I like his stuff.
But he would say the same thing. He would say the exact same thing. I mean, he has a strong sense of ethical standard. And, you know, for me, because I've got a bit of a martial arts background, you know, it's interesting you're saying it, you know, you don't just copy or you don't just mimic what someone else says. You should try to learn how they think or why they think the way they do and what those thought processes are, and then emulate the thought process, not emulate the thought themselves, because you don't want to copy somebody else and just be their carbon copy, because then at that point you're a groupie.
Yeah. I suppose martial arts does that to some degree, where you go up with belts, like you look up to sort of the masters, but then when you become the master, you're not still some doting fanboy. You become your own master.
Right. And martial arts is nothing but a foundation, right? And so what was interesting about the base style, because I've studied two styles. The first style I studied, what was interesting about that, and I think what makes it relevant to this conversation, is before they would award you your black belt, you had to create your own form. And then the form would be judged by the masters that were there as part of your black belt test. So basically it was proving that you could think for yourself and that you could process for yourself and that you could apply what you knew in real ways. So if the techniques in your form didn't make sense, or they were ineffective, or they just looked like they were retarded and get you killed, obviously you failed. But if you didn't, then that would, and this was just one aspect of that black belt test. And I use this martial arts anecdote because, like, you also look at, like, Bruce Lee, who says, you know, you take what is useful and you discard the rest. And that whole idea of thinking for yourself and making your own decisions and processing those things independently is I think it's absolutely crucial. And the reason I believe that going your own way is not for every man, it's because doing that takes a lot of psychological, emotional, and intestinal fortitude that I don't think a lot of men are interested in.
No, that's right. That's right. Not many people want to be their own master, you know, their own god, for want of a better word, not in an egotistical way, like just to be the end all and be all and stand on your own foundations.
Yeah, I think you said it right when you said not a lot of people want to be their own master. And that's the point. That is the entire point, is that when, and you were talking about that light, when you listen to a man who's gone his own way and you hear him free from hate, free from red pill rage, free from ignorance, and free from judgment. He speaks with sincerity and he speaks with conviction. It's not fanatical. It's not dogmatic. It's just matter of fact. It's just plain truths, plain honest to God truths. And they make a lot of sense. And so I think that's part of the reason why, like you were saying when you were talking to TFM or you listen to TFM stuff, a lot of people, I think that resonates with them because they understand he believes what he says, and he puts to what he says into practice. And I'll tell you, I belong to MGTOW.com, and there's a lot of guys on there who they support MGTOW or Men You're Going Your Own Way. They support the concept, but it's the same thing. They're in their garage watching MGTOW content on YouTube, and then they go back into their house to their family. Or they'll, you know what I'm saying? But these guys are out there, and they're like, I can't talk to my coworkers like this. How can I be this and that? And it's like, well, you're right. You're living two lives. You have to make a decision.
Well, look, don't get me wrong. There's practical anonymity as well. Like, I get the guys who have the family, and if they know their wives and there's a potential of her all of a sudden getting upset and saying, I thought I knew you, I'm taking the kids, I can't believe you think this way. the amount of vitriol when you actually say I'm my own person. I don't work off a female script anymore. Doesn't mean I don't love you, sweetheart. It doesn't mean I don't love our kids. They can't see it that way. And also with me, my current girlfriend, she doesn't know about this stuff I do, not because I'm hiding it, but whenever there's a conversation, I speak exactly the same way I do in my videos and to you, about exactly the same opinions I have. She just doesn't know about my moniker of HuMAN and the videos I produce. Whereas I'm exactly that same person when I speak to her on exactly the same topics. And it's just, I don't want it spilling over to, Facebook and people with an axe to grind and my boss finding out,
you have feminist witch hunters. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I personally believe that a man can go his own way and he can ghost at the same time. I think that ghosting in modern society is basically like hiding in plain sight. That to me is a non-issue because that's a self-preservation thing. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are people out there, they support men who go their own way, but I think they support it from a perspective of
lip service.
I can talk about this online, but I can't talk about this to anybody I know. Or they'll communicate completely differently online than they will with the people they know. It's like what you said. You said you'll speak to the same facts and the same arguments and the same issues with your girlfriend that you speak to me.
I'm exactly the same person with her and in public when these issues are raised as I am here. The only difference is the moniker I use with HuMAN. But with guys, they get off on MGTOW in the same way they get off on like porn or something. And I can understand there's this psychological power of having something hidden and it's mine, it's a dirty little secret, whatever. And there's truths and I get it and it's building and one day, I'll get there. But the thing is, the more you compartmentalize, if you don't let any of that out and creep into your real world, you just frustrate yourself more anxiety. You feel like the longer it goes on, it's one of those things we talked about where it was the difference between a male and female mindset. The longer being inauthentic, lying or not keeping your word you go as a guy, the more it weighs on you. Women don't have that. They sort of talk about feminism plain-faced on YouTube, but they also unashamedly talk about it in real life. They tell you exactly what they did. The only stuff they keep hidden is infidelities and screwing around because that could actually change their lives. Whereas we have to keep our anonymity in other areas, not just screwing around, but basically you have to be schizophrenic in your personality to sort of take the red pill, come through it and then slowly sort of let it dissipate out into your real world and have the confidence to do it. There's a lot of hurdles and I appreciate that. I mean, a lot of guys get me wrong when they think, oh, well, it's easy for you. You're already there. I'm different to everyone else. Yeah, I get that. And I've got things that are a lot easier for me than would be to other guys. But then again, there's some guys that have parts of their character that come to them a lot easier than it does me. I have to work hard to overcome certain things, whereas for other people it wouldn't have been the case. Either way, the more you can actually be authentic, rationally authentic. If you have to, like you said, ghost in certain ways, a rational self-preservation, do so. But don't be two different people. Don't lie to yourself. I think that's where it weighs the most on guys. And guys get depressed and suicidal. And a lot of these kind of angry guys that, it comes out as anger, which is better than depression and suicidal tendencies. I'll give you that. But stop lying to yourself. Speak out. People just need to stop wanting to shut their mouths and feel like it's all right just to say, okay, I just think this. Try and be honest with what you believe. The more you lie to yourself, the more you'll find it hard to go your own way. And going your own way is just being honest with yourself, is just being free internally. You can try being as free externally as you want, buy a Ferrari, fuck as many hot chicks as you can, have all this window dressing that you can point to and go and say, hey fellas, see? Aren't I tough? But you're not going to hide from yourself when you go to bed at night.
Right. And I think that's absolutely important, and I do the same thing. I'll communicate my perspectives. I will communicate those very clearly, whether I'm out in the open or not. And there are some people who do know that, I do have this sort of conversations online and, obviously some of these get uploaded to YouTube and elsewhere. They don't know where they're at. I don't advertise where those things at. And again, it's not because I'm insecure about what I say. It's because I don't want to be targeted by feminist backlash. And you see this all the time. And I think those guys that are genuinely concerned about the kind of backlash that would happen from gynocentrics who are threatened by a man who goes his own way, I totally get the whole ghosting thing. And I support it completely. I think that every man at some point should do that. But I think that if a man is only hiding MGTOW because it's his dirty little secret, I'm not convinced that's the right reason.
Oh, no. You can kind of forgive it. If it's one of those first steps, because the ingestion of the red pill is chaotic and you're uncalibrated and you're trying to find your feet again, right? I get it in those moments. But if you're the same recycled, red pill moment 1, 2, 3, 4 years running, it's like people who love being miserable. People know friends that just are always negative, that they've always got a temper. They've got some character trait that they don't like, other people don't like being around it, and even some of those people recognize it in themselves, but just don't know how to get rid of it, or just plainly don't want to. They don't have the discipline, or they're internally lazy.
It's their perfect paradise.
Yeah, but I understand the initial confusion and all this negative stuff coming up, anger, confusion, attacking, trolling, trying to find your feet. But you got to want something. I always reference Paul Proteus's great video. It's freedom from something. There's got to be freedom to something. Where you go to can just be your own little baby step, and it can be enough. That can be enough to satisfy you for the long term. Like, I'm pretty sure with you, a big baby step, not to you, but to other people, would have been writing the book or making yourself public with the book or putting yourself out there. That takes away a lot of burden and frees you. Mine was starting to write and produce videos. Little steps in life where you give yourself permission to do stuff that's honest and genuine. That's the important stuff. Keeping it hidden is death. And again, go back to those kids on the cannon. They died at puberty. Most guys die at puberty and then they wait 60 or 70 years to be buried in a coffin.
Right.
And it's being able to reconnect with the freedom of a child. Don't act like a child, but your healthy solipsistic freedom that nothing else exists except what you want it to be, rationally speaking. Like, I cherry pick what works for me. All that matters to me is how I can make sense of things to have a really good life, be happy, be clear on things, and be confident as a man. And it's not this kind of irrational delusion, because I can rationally justify it. Like, I like the quote by Ayn Rand, and again, I cherry pick from people that speak certain workable truths to me. Ayn Rand once brilliantly said of death, when asked, "Are you afraid of death?" She goes, "No." She goes, "I won't die. It's the world that's going to end." And I thought that was a brilliant way. She thinks the way she's given voice to how I actually feel, the way I have a perspective from myself. Rationally, I know when I die, the world will go on, and I know the practical ontology of what will happen. But I don't care.
But she put that paradigm shift in. The point is that your role in it won't be relevant anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. There's no reason to feel
exactly.
Dead. My perspective is all that matters to my life, to my mental health, how I am as a man, and as we said, to become your own master. Some people need, say, bigger, more tougher macho constructs like, be your own master, or, climb your mountain, like, be a lion, be invincible, have that suit of armor, be impenetrable. Need these kind of high platitudes. But the more you can actually be confident with casting those suits of armor off, in my experience, the quiet kind of confidence, there's nothing like it. That initial anger and the angry suit of armor is good. But, when you hear someone that's a bit too angry and forceful, when they say, "Yo, my life's great, bitches aren't going to tell me what to do," and blah, 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 and you kind of go, "Whoa, okay, calm down,
buddy." And you can hear the insecurity in their voice.
Yeah, are you trying to convince me or yourself? Whereas when you hear someone that's so completely at ease and believes in what they're saying, they're not trying to convince you at all. And that's what I mean about TFM or others. I'd say to guys, learn why and how they are the way they are, and be inspired by that, and cherry pick like I did from Ayn Rand. Like, see what works for you, that paradigm shift, how you can think, your epistemology of knowing what's true. That's what's actually going to free you, not parroting concepts and one-liners.
Yeah, and I think the big issue too is that, you know, there comes a time where platitudes aren't enough.
No.
You know, and it's interesting you bring up. So, like, you know, I talk about the martial arts a lot, again, because that's my background and that's my upbringing. But you see the guys that, and it's the same thing you see, like with men going their own way. These guys aren't macho. They're not, you know, they're not out to prove anything. They've already done that. They've already proven it to themselves. You know, it's zero fucks given. They don't really care what anybody else's opinion is because they know who they are. They know where they stop and where they start. They know what the four corners of their particular lifestyle box looks like, and they're content there. Yeah, you have these guys out there, and they're like, "Oh, I'm rich, and I get this, and da da da," you know, and I can get this woman here, or I can get that woman. None of that's relevant. And I used to think of things in terms of alpha beta, and I no longer consider them anymore. Because I think that while alpha beta is relevant in the animal kingdom for mating preference, it's not relevant for anything else. And what I mean by that is that there are men out there who they've got postgraduate degrees, they're in fantastic physical condition. By all objective measurements, they've got successful jobs, maybe they're making 6 or 7 figures. But then when it comes to women, they immediately turn into disposable utilities for them. But for all intents and purposes, these are the what some people in society might consider the alpha male. And the reality is, though, is that a lot of these people don't have any concept of who they are beyond how they can serve a gynocentric system. Yeah. Yeah. But you see that you know, they're macho, they're, you know, they pretend confidence, you know, they're the center of the party. Well,
the PUA stuff and the guys who just believe in the surface platitudes of MGTOW without actually trying to understand and be those concepts and believe in them and internalize them. It's almost as though, in terms of the alpha thing you were talking about, the animal kingdom, there's too many guys walking around wearing lion suits rather than being your own individual who stands on their own 2 feet, who projects what a lion projects. But there's too many people, they put on the lion suit, they can memorize a few pickup lines and they know what to wear. They know a great comeback if a feminist says something to them. They just pluck these things out of their mental pigeonholes and they think they've won. You don't win any more than you go to a job you hate and come home and binge watch TV series. That's not a satisfying life. Like, again, you're not living life. You're trying to kind of stave death off.
And that's my point, is that you take away the surface attention, you take away the audience, you take away most of these men's incentive to go around peacocking, pretending to be a lion. I think that is where a lot of men go sideways. They have that. And I don't mean this in any kind of disrespectful way. So in the United States, if you work for an employer, you're considered a 1040 taxpayer. Does that make sense?
No, explain that to me.
Okay, so we have 40-hour week jobs. Well, on average, they're called full-time jobs. So you'll go to work, like say you'll go to work for a retail company, or maybe you'll go to work for a high-tech company, and you're just a 1040 wage earner. So when you file your taxes at the end of the year, you file them under what's called a 1040, which is like the wage earner taxes. So your employer contributes your taxes, you contribute your taxes, but you're considered what's called a 1040 wage earner. Yeah. Those people who are self-employed are considered entrepreneurs. Okay? So they're self-employed basically. And there's a theory that, you know, 1040 wage earners, they need to have a box to live in, because if you put them in an environment where they would have to run their own business, the first thing they would do is fail.
Oh, sure.
Even if they had all the knowledge, even if they had all the training, even if they had all the education, the first thing they would do is fail. You know, but then you have entrepreneurs who they have all these obstacles in their place and they succeed no matter what. And again, it's through mental strength and what I like to refer to as adversarial strength. In other words, strength in the face of adversity.
Oh, it's the whole celebrity thing too. Like, everyone fantasizes and wants to be something, but no one knows themselves enough to look in the mirror and kind of go, yeah, but I couldn't be bothered doing all the work, or I don't have enough to put in the hours and the strength. I'm not smart enough. I'm not creative enough. Whatever it may be. There's not enough people with that kind of honesty, let alone the work ethic. Most people just want free shit. Just like a lot of the divorce laws, when they're trying to calculate alimony and child support, they kind of factor in well, she, quote unquote, gave up her career and she could have been a CEO. So based on that, she gave up a lot to be a housewife. It's like, no, fuck. Barely any of you would have been middle management, let alone CEOs. But you like to think that you gave up your big prize of being a CEO.
They play the what if game.
They do that. And guys do it too, but women do it a lot. Because it's more comfortable for them to live in continual possibilities. And this is something related to women are children that TFM's mentioned a few times, where children are nothing but possibilities. And women love thinking of themselves as endless possibilities. You never know, unicorns exist, which is part of, my videos on older women. They continually believe, and why shouldn't they? From when they were young, their dads doted on them, gave them everything they wanted. So why wouldn't they believe that until the day they die, men wouldn't lie down in traffic and be willing to kiss their asses? It flies at the face of their childish mentalities, because that's all they know. They're always like fantastically aspirational women. They're adult toddlers, and they'll never change because they never have to.
Well, and I think, though, that it's interesting because all of that is true until a woman hits the wall. Once a woman hits a wall, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be Captain Save-A-Ho. Captain Save-A-Ho will always exist to feed the egos of these post-wall women. But these women will never get the men's attention that they had hoped for. They'll settle for Captain Save-A-Ho. They won't. He will not be their fourth choice. He will be the choice that's left. The guy that's at the end of the, it's in the bar at the end of the night who's barely too drunk to walk out. And the woman has said, I don't want to be alone, so I guess he'll do.
And all this stuff makes 100% perfect sense to me as a male. But I just keep thinking this just does not compute to a woman. Because even women who were at best threes when they were in high school or in college, they could get the Christian Greys for one drunken night. Those kind of guys, like any other guys, like Sexual Variety and Conquest, he'll fuck her for a night. But she'll believe because she can get Christian Grey, who's a 10, and then moving forward, like she's never going to lower those standards. And so the more she invests and sacrifices and lets her fertility go and gets older and gets barren, she won't want to take second best. In her mind, she's thinking, fuck, I better get the lottery ticket. I didn't wait this long for nothing. That's how her mind thinks. Like, I'm always amazed at how women's minds differ to men's. And if men can really just accept it, not be wowed by it, but just kind of accept it in the same way that the sun comes up and goes down. And I've dated single mums when the initial conversations when I talk to them, and I always ask them questions about how their last relationship ended, if they were married, what happened. And no kidding, in their eyes, the men usually did very little or nothing at all, and they were just unhappy, and they married the wrong guy. They were being honest about, I married the wrong guy, he wasn't for me. I get all that. But then they'll be angry at their ex-husband for nothing. He did nothing wrong. He didn't expect the divorce, but she just needed to, find herself and have her eat, pray, love moment. Right? And when she leaves, before I forget, when she leaves, the way she describes him and the anger, in her mind, he fucked up her dream. That's how she sees it. It's very different to what men see. Men see the rational, oh, did I cheat or not? Or I promised and then I feel bad because I broke a promise. I did something wrong, that's why she left me. Whereas a woman will do everything wrong, she'll be 100% responsible, but she'll concoct it in her mind to be like, well, I got to be happy and I'm not happy with him, and fuck him because he ruined my happiness. It's completely different.
Yeah, I agree with that. However, I would say this. Women do have a lucid moment during that time. They actually do. And this is somewhat proven. So women will regret leaving their husband. They'll sincerely regret it. And you see this with all these post-wall professional women who can't find a man now. They're 40, they're 50, they're 60. They say, you'll read them in articles or like the Daily Mail and a few others where they've said, I had the perfect husband. We split up. She didn't say why. She didn't say, they gloss over the facts because the facts were ugly. She was a whore, and she let the cock carousel do the drive-through program. And all of a sudden, there it was. But they know in the quiet moments when they're by themselves, they know. And that's why all these women today are miserable, because they know. So they're like, oh, he made all these mistakes. He ruined my life. This is messed up. I'm going to go find a better man. Well, guess what? You found the best there was, and you didn't appreciate or respect him, and this is what happens. And so when that accountability comes, they do see it. They do, and part of that anger is that they know the truth. And so when they try to lie to themselves, it just doesn't work right.
Yeah, I mean, they're angry at themselves when they're angry at their ex. I get that. And they do have those little lucid moments, but they've got such a big capacity to lie to themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's
cognitive dissonance is huge.
That's the frustrating thing with guys, not just the lying beforehand. Like, they don't even have any ownership of the relationship and them in it. I've had women in moments where it was fantastic. Say you're having one of those really special moments, you know, whether it's you're walking somewhere and it's a beautiful sunset, or you're eating, or whatever it might be, and they kind of look at you and they voice, "Oh, this is perfect. I hope this never gets taken away from us." And I look at her and I go, "What the fuck are you saying?" And like, I have such an ownership in knowing that this is great, whereas she's still at the whims of, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Whereas I've got this solid foundation of, well, fuck, my life is set. This is great. If my life keeps going like this, I don't have a care in the world. These moments are great. Why wouldn't it continue tomorrow? Whereas hers is like, this is great. I hope it doesn't change tomorrow.
Right. Well, and you know, and that's why I think that it's important to educate men. You know, I think it's important that we share these realities with other men so that they can appreciate, or at least have a viable choice of whether or not they want to take the red pill. Because I think a lot of times, I don't think that the red pill creates the chaos that a lot of people say that it does. I mean, obviously the red pill grief cycle is real. Red pill rage is real. But I think that a lot of people, and I've talked to some people who, when they first get exposed to what the realities are, right? Like you were saying, once you know the truth, you can't go back, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these men have a mini breakdown. It's like they just have this nervous breakdown because they've learned that everything they were told is just not observable reality.
Well, sometimes that's the best thing for them, as long as they're not suicidal. Yeah, it's different for everyone. It's hard. It doesn't taste like ambrosia. It tastes like shit. But having the right ear out, listening to the right people, reading the right things, having good mentors, and trying to internalize it and being the things that you hear and inspire you, I think that they're the right way to go. And not playing it safe by just kind of treating MGTOW videos like you do porn or something like that. The fact that you need to hide it from yourself, I think is something some guys need to look at. And again, I don't want to seem like I'm preaching. Again, I say to everyone, I preface everything with, do what you want, get married if you want. I don't care. I have my opinion about that. But I would never want to stop anyone thinking or being anything they want to be, as long as they're happy and their life's better. But just, there's nothing like reality, because there's other people that will give you your reality if you don't give yourself your own.
Well, I agree with that wholeheartely, but this also goes back to what Paul Proteus said. You know what you're working against. What are you working for? What are your goals? What are you interested in? And you know, one of the things that I've talked to my children about, I've got, 3 children who are grown and a 4th who's on the way. And I tell them, because, a lot of times they're like, well, I don't know what I want to do with my life, or they got to that stage where they ask those questions. And so I said, well, maybe until you figure out what you want to do, you can tell yourself what you don't want to do, and then just go out of your way to actively avoid those things and see what's left.
Yeah. Sometimes focusing on what you don't want is a big thing. So an easy calibration is to go, okay, think about it from the other way. Get rid of things. Simplicity, find out what you don't want anymore. Actively avoid that. And then you'll start to find out, it'll start to be clear what you do want. Because what you do want tends to be an unknown. So you're right. Perhaps the best thing to do is focus on what you don't want anymore. Unequivocally, just cross it off the list and don't engage with it, whether it's the type of women, whether it's where you work, the job, where you live, your lifestyle, your fitness, whatever it is. But just fucking start crossing stuff off the list.
Exactly. And the other side of that is that, when it comes to careers, I always tell my kids, I said, look, find a job that is going to support the lifestyle that you want. who cares what the job is as long as you can do it competently and it's not going to drive you nuts. The reason they call it work is because it's not supposed to be fun. Now, if you could do something that you love, that's great. But a lot of times people end up doing something as a job and then they learn to love it later.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and more importantly, as far as that, to go back to that other statement about crossing off what's not you, in the United States, we have a multi-billion-dollar storage industry.
Yeah.
We have households of people who they have so much shit, they have to store it off-site because they don't have room for it. If you're one of those people listening to this, get rid of the stuff that doesn't fit in your home comfortably.
Yeah, that's true, man. If you can't get rid of the physical stuff that's trash and that's gathering dust, you're have almost no chance of getting rid of the internal stuff that you don't need.
Exactly. And that's the thing that a lot of people, I think, miss. Because if you accumulate things just to accumulate them and not use them, and they don't improve your life, or they're not an investment in your lifestyle immediately or in the long term, then those things end up being an expense and a waste of money.
Well, even the lexicon and language that the culture uses, you even used it then. You said the word investment. Most people colloquially think of that straight away as you keep adding to it. You know, that's not about simplicity or getting rid of. Investments, people think, is just a continual accumulation. And the more you can continually accumulate, the bigger your mountain at the end of your life, that's when you win. Whereas the opposite is generally true. Throw out old stuff. The simplicity of having less things, until you start doing it, you don't know how it feels. Just start chucking shit away that's got dust on it. I know myself, living on my own, like I've got a spare room that I just use as storage. And I try and make a point of every week we have the bins go out. Every week I try and throw at least one thing from there away. Whether it's a pair of sneakers, a pair of socks, just the easy stuff is the stuff that's got dust on it.
Right.
A lot of these things people know, you know. Philosophically, you know, a lot of them are taught sort of as old spiritual teachings, whatever you want to sort of lean towards. But all these truths have been passed down in different forms, in different religious groups, philosophies, simplicity, thinking for yourself, standing on your own rationality, being ethically moral, and having high self-esteem. That's an important one. Then you don't have to worry about, am I a follower? Am I authentic? Am I individual? Like, being rational, standing on your own ethical and moral principles, and then having high self-esteem. They're kind of a couple of watermarks.
You know, a friend of mine who has since passed away told me a long time ago that life is like a bowl of oatmeal with raisins and lumps. And I believe that. You know, life is kind of bland most of the time. Occasionally things are great. Those are the raisins. And, you know, occasionally things suck. Those are the lumps. The point, though, is that when you're living your life, when you're structuring your life, and when you're choosing to make decisions about your life, whether those are decisions to clean out your clutter or whether those are decisions to accept the reality of hypergamy and gynocentrism or to deny it, at the end of the day, I think those quiet moments that you were talking about, I identify those as serenity. And I don't think it's like forced serenity. I think you kind of just get used to it, if that makes sense. So you follow certain habits, you live according to certain convictions, and then the serenity just comes. It just arrives one day. You're not paying attention. You're doing something, you know, you're on your way to work, you know, you're on your way somewhere else. And then you come to realize that the things that you are working toward, you've already achieved. Yeah.
You get to a point where you're your own biggest fan.
Right. Without being an egotistical asshole.
No. And those that kind of, you know, are still finding their way, it's easy to kind of point to confident people and call them egotistical.
Right.
And some of them are, and some of us who don't think we are might have a bit in us. It might be a functional egotism that helps us lift our head a little bit. Doesn't really matter. Like, what does it matter whether I think you or someone else is egotistical?
What I mean by egotistical is, I mean those people that go out of their way to try to make other people feel bad. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking. I mean, we all have a, you know, when we get to a certain point, we all have a highly realized sense of identity and self-confidence, and we're all confident in who we are when we know who we are. But, you know, it's like you were saying, like the guy that's like, he's telling you how great his life is, and the reality is, it sounds like he's trying to talk himself into belief.
Go your own way, gentlemen. Later. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe, and donate. And don't forget to hit the bell icon once you've subscribed to be notified of my next video. Thanks.